Howdy, it's Stuck on Pandora here with loot opening number 3. We got a long one here for you. This is over 100 Jennerit packs searching for a solar sustainer on my Miko. As of making this, attack damage was still affecting Miko, and it was undeniable to put attack damage on whoever you're healing, whoever you were the pocket healer for. Even though I don't run a pocket healer, but my god, if you were a pocket healer and you had solar sustainer, you were really buffing your buddy. Make sure they appreciate this. So for the first moments of this, I'm going to continue my soapbox on Battleborn, what's new in Battleborn, and I am going to tell you, I'll open this up with a preview of my upcoming loot guide, which I think is going to satisfy any tips and tricks I could possibly give. I believe you'll enjoy it, as I plan it to be comprehensive. Now, the opening of the packs went long into the night. Like I said, this is over 100 of them, so the tail end of the video is pure loot. Let me give you a preview to that loot guide. There are 14 categories of gear in the game. Alright, from attack damage on a fist to attack speed on a dagger. Alright, these are further separated into Borderlands 2 nod here. When Grandma burps, Patrick obeys. White, green, blue, purple, and orange. So 14 different types of gear, from attack damage to attack speed, broken into five different rarities. And then finally they break them into factions, just like Borderlands again, where Borderlands had like different corporations that made guns like TDR and Torg, explosions. Well, in Battleborn they do it by faction, because all the factions have come together. And I want to talk more about these factions in the next 100,000 credits. As far as I want to talk about PvE in that one, but now what's important is loot. So every faction has their unique stamp on these pieces of gear, usually defined by their role in the story. For instance, the UPR doesn't produce an attack damage fist or an attack speed dagger, because their role in the story is as a unifying force. They were peacekeepers. And so this also means the debuff on their gear coincides with what they fail to produce. They don't make attack damage gear, so their gear isn't good at that, and you'll get a debuff on their flawed gear for it. Another example is Jennerits. Jennerits are purely melee characters. Jennerit do not produce any damage resistance gear, and so the debuff applied to their gear is negative damage reduction, and others. And now that negative damage reduction is especially bad in my opinion. I've tested that a lot on their flawed whites, and if you go up against a high DPS hero, it'll exaggerate their numbers, and I think you really get killed more than it's worth. You'll notice also that my loot bank here is just totally filling up currently. I'm really appreciating the new space and the new loadout spaces. So I'm asked all the time how I managed to organize all my loot that's now in my bank. It's much easier than it seems. I only keep max rolls, and so once you know that there's 5 rarities, 14 categories, and 5 factions, but every faction is only going to produce 4 in each of those 14 categories, you realize you don't actually have that much loot to collect, and you don't need to have redundancies. Okay, so I try to keep max rolls with or I also try to keep max rolls with a debuff applied. So there's a max roll flawed, and there's also a max roll perfect, and I'll get into this. And you keep flawed gear for either its cheap activation or its possible utility, because it's very possible that the debuff won't affect your character, or both. And of course you keep max roll flawless just because, hey, shiny, right? But also they're useful. Alright, so the easiest ways to recognize this is to memorize the pricing. Flawed white is 0 activation cost gear and contains the faction specific debuff. That one's easy, but let's get into these debuffs real quick. So if you get an Eldred piece, it's going to be either negative max shield, or negative recharge delay, or buildable cost. I think it's 21% buildable cost. LLC, you get negative movement speed, negative sprint speed, negative cooldown, and positive CC duration. CC duration is a kind of a funny category, and we'll talk about that more in the Loot Compendium guide. Rogues, you'll get negative max health, or you'll get negative healing received, or negative heal power. Jennerit, negative damage resistance, negative reload speed, negative recoil. They're not shooters, so they don't make very good shooting gear. UPR, negative skill damage, negative critical damage, negative attack speed. So, your best subset of flawed whites, limited bank space, you don't want redundancies, typically Eldred or Rogue because they're near universal. Typically, I keep 2 flawed for each category of loot to have a loadout ready for each hero. Flawed white made by Eldreds will not hurt an Eldred, which has no shield. So, you know, like Miko's and Melka is like the master of the 0 activation cost build. On a similar note, a flawed white by rogues with negative heal power won't affect a non-healer. So, but keep in mind that heal power does affect your lifesteal. So, you know, like if you're a Galilei or Deondi has lifesteal, maybe not the best. Alright, so with this in mind, let's go through this cost, the pricing. This is the easiest way to organize it. Know if you can like just sell or you want to keep. 0 max flawed white. 0 cost is going to be your max flawed white. 420 vape nation. That's perfect white. 420 is a max flawed green. All right, 714 shards is a perfect green. And greens are currently underestimated as their faction-specific passive tends to synergize well with their heroes. Green Jennerit Fist, probably best in slot for a melee character currently. 630 is a flawed, max flawed blue. 924 shards is a perfect blue. And blues are unique for sharing the same primary and secondary buff. Most notable here is the best in slot, Rogue, Cooldown Watch, Gambler's Greyhound. 756 is a max flawed purple. 1050 shards is a perfect purple. Now, purples give the passive buff associated with that faction's green gear, but take no qualifier. So both greens and blues you have to do something to proc that kill, either get an assist or do some sort of like melee damage or something on the Jennerit Green Fist. And flawed purples they're probably the future, really, because they're cheap. They're 0 activation cost gear 2.0, same utility as 0 activation cost gear. In a longer match, they're pretty cheap, and you get these really nice bonuses early before everyone else. Then we have legendaries. 1800 is a perfect legendary or a bad roll legendary, and that's just sort of the way that is right now. Love it or hate it. Now, legendaries occupy a dynamic relationship of pros and cons, and basically how the devs are feeling about their existence this month. The current trend is changing the utility of a legendary if it was especially good on a certain class. Legendaries retain a powerful role when put into a loadout for a specific purpose. Some terrible, some are S tier, but that's for another video. But you know, don't throw a legendary into your loadout just because it's a legendary, it's got to be good, because the passive probably isn't worth the cost if you don't have an intention in mind for that. All right, now let's kind of talk about the latest happenings as we get deeper into this opening. As I'm uploading this, we're less than a week post-July patch, which seems to have been a resounding success, at least judging from the forums and subreddit. Personally, I've loved the latest patch. Monuments, Outskirts, Snowblind were exactly the way I would like to see Battleborn headed. Options: ways to outmaneuver chronic stalemating. I've read complaints saying that Monuments is too range-focused. Then people respond that all maps are range-focused. I'd argue all maps but Monuments are range-focused. Monuments is more wide and vertical than any Battleborn map to date. Range is countered by an underground left and right hallway flank. These melee backdoors are countered with elevated plateaus where characters like Reyna, Khalees, or Whiskey can guard. These middle grounds are thus countered by high vertical slopes. Echelon is the worst committer of the stalemating, with only 2 lanes of approach opening right onto the sentry. Overgrowth has some variance in map usage, but ultimately is a narrow cleft in a turret-defended hallway. Both maps feature long, open spaces, mostly flat and void of cover, that have made certain heroes a requirement. Personally, I was getting bored. But I especially love the look and feel of the new maps, in particular Snowblind. Putting every capture point into separate arenas with varying angles, cover, and entries has renewed my excitement in the game. Overall, time to kill is up. Legendaries weren't made obsolete, but made specific in their utility. Benedict is a worry, but I feel Battleborn is in its best state to date. I believe Battleborn is at its best as a fast, casual MOBA that when explored reveals enough depth to make it competitive. the struggle to mobile on console and pugs has continued to be a challenge, with the likes of Battle Miko being default Miko, Reyna a non-entity, and DPS heroes run-of-the-mill. Changes brought that are pushing a more PvP-focused combat loop and quicker time to kill will best serve the game, which is the direction I hope the game continues to follow. And as people grow to be addicted to the nuclear plumage of a KO, so they will learn the finer details of maximizing strength through team composition. I would still push for a further lowering of time to kill. In Battlefield, my favorite playstyle was going rogue behind enemy lines with a knife to collect dog tags. It's something I could see done on Whiskey with his slow but powerful knife attack. The idea of an assassin could be further enforced with a backstab the mechanic that rewards flanking the enemy team. Deandi, Caldarius, Whiskey still lack quick ways to burst enemies down. They have an emphasis on finishing enemies. And I don't know that this role has really yet to mesh well in Battleborn's combat loop, because most people will just say, you're stealing kills. And so I think that a backstab could work as a fun mechanic to unleash that burst damage that they lack, but also a debuff within the vein of the direction of Reyna or Alani with their geyser and her priority target. And I think in the direction that Gearbox is currently taking with Whiskey Tango Foxtrot is in that same sort of vein, in that area, because he's now a utility guy. You know, he's got a debuff and he can use the scrap cannon a lot. So in my opinion, get behind someone as Caldarius or Deandi or Whiskey. This should not only apply a priority target, but I'll apply a backstab. So if you manage to, like, say, get behind a Montana and you pull out Whiskey's knife and you hit him in the back, I think that should really do a lot of damage, because that would give them that burst, and then we know that they have that finishing potential that they're so good at. I believe a better nerf, I also believe this, I believe a better nerf on a pocket healer is just making heroes do more damage, in the meanwhile keeping tanks a tank. So, another interesting result of the July patch is with the right gear, a very tough, tanky version of Gult can be created. From mini tests and trying to make these build videos and trying to improve them and everything, I really don't think that giving yourself a ton of health is helpful. It doesn't seem to be anyways. I think that it's all about shields. I think it's like Borderlands style, and I mean, Gult, there's potential there. That's another build video coming up. Some questionable matters brought into this patch are Wound and Benedict's buff. Wound was a smart way to parse the work of a Miko nerf. I mean, we could either nerf Miko into the ground, which some would argue has happened, or they could do this very resourceful and interesting, clever thing called a Wound, and we're going to see how that ends up playing out. I think that they did good by Reyna, because the cooldown on her ult is so quick now, and that utility, people see it now. People are actually scared of Reyna's ult. They're like, oh my god, they're gonna knock me into the middle of this melee frenzy down there. But the Miko nerf, it seems to have corrected pocket healing. And if you were a dedicated pocket healer, you know, you definitely got nerfed. But what I'm hearing from better Mikos, more refined Mikos, is they feel more like a buildable now. They feel like they're stuck in the back as a support station and not actually a combat medic. So we're really gonna see, and really, he's always been squishy, with his entire head being a crit. Now he's lost a lot of movement speed, and with his wound effect, he doesn't really have that self-heal. So we're gonna see, and Benedict is just scary. Benedict is just absolutely scary right now. Because you'll have a Benedict on your team and he'll just be smashing buildables, and he can kill low health heroes in like 3 rockets. So anyways, hey, the Lootpocalypse is coming to an end as I make this, so I'm off the farm. I plan to discuss the PvE in the next opening, some ideas, some thoughts, and hey man, you guys rock. Twitch.tv/StuckOnPandora. I hope you'll stop by and support Battleborn, and I'll see you guys at another 100,000 credits.